Welcome back to another combined Those Twisted Pines and SCP reading, dear researchers. Today we're going to be reading SCP-3060, Sleep Paralysis. Now without further ado. Item number SCP-3060, Object Class, previously Euclid, now Keter. Special Containment Procedures. Individual instances of SCP-3060 are to be kept in high-security lockers within the storage wing of Site-64. All testing involving SCP-3060 requires the approval of both the Site Ethics Committee and Site Command. No more than 4 individuals may be infected by SCP-3060 for testing purposes at any given time. Individuals infected by SCP-3060 are to be kept in Type 1 standard humanoid containment chambers within the Humanoid Anomaly Containment Wing of Site-64. Cells have been equipped with alarm systems to prevent instances from entering REM sleep, outside of designated sleeping hours, approximately 2200 to 0600 local time. During designated sleeping hours, all personnel are to evacuate from the radius of each infected individual's anomalous effect. Following termination of any individual infected by SCP-3060, containment personnel are to initiate a site-wide lockdown and begin the Hypnos protocol to prevent the spread of infection. Description: Instances of SCP-3060 are small medical devices that superficially resemble continuous positive airway pressure (CPAP) machines. The individual materials that compose SCP-3060 instances are non-anomalous and operate identically to a typical CPAP machine of its size and make. The Foundation currently has 5 instances of SCP-3060 in its custody. SCP-3060's anomalous effects become apparent when worn by a sleeping human. When an individual wearing an instance of SCP-3060 enters their second REM cycle, a humanoid incorporeal entity, hereafter referred to as SCP-3060-A, will appear within a 5-meter radius of the individual and stand over them until they wake up. At this point, SCP-3060-A will disappear and the individual wearing SCP-3060 will become infected. From that point on, regardless as to whether the individual wears SCP-3060, the SCP-3060-A entity will appear when they enter their second REM cycle each night, and remain until awakening. While instances of SCP-3060-A appear as featureless silhouettes upon first manifestation, they quickly take on a unique shape based on each infected individual. As such, SCP-3060-A entities have no standard appearance. While a full list of observed SCP-3060-A instances can be found in Document 3060-B, notable observed instances include a figure roughly the size of a human infant composed entirely of fused teeth, a humanoid superficially resembling an elderly woman dressed in dark clothes, lacking a mouth or eyes. The instance's arms are both severely injured, with compound fractures visible. A partially disintegrated humanoid composed of ash, dressed in red lingerie. A naked humanoid covered in tire tracks and showing signs of severe crash injuries. A humanoid whose torso consists of a large mouth. A clown. While an SCP-3060-A entity stands within the presence of an infected individual, any additional human subjects that enters a 50-meter radius of the infected will enter a catatonic state. At this point, an additional instance of SCP-3060-A will appear within the proximity of the infected individual. The additional SCP-3060-A entity will then approach the catatonic subject, phasing through solid matter if the subject is in a separate room. Upon arriving at the subject, the new SCP-3060-A instance will phase its hand through the subject's skull and then vanish, causing the subject to immediately fall asleep. All subjects touched by the SCP-3060-A entity in this manner become new instances of SCP-3060 infected upon awakening. Testing has shown that awakening the infected, whether through physical or auditory stimuli, following the appearance of an SCP-3060-A entity will cause the latter to immediately vanish and catatonic subjects to regain movement. Additionally, SCP-3060-A entities will not approach non-catatonic subjects outside the range of an infected individual's anomalous properties. Non-human subjects are immune to all of SCP-3060's effects. All attempts to communicate with SCP-3060-A instances have thus far been met with failure. SCP-3060 infection has long-term effects on the health of infected persons. After at least 3 days, infected individuals often begin to display fatigue, mood changes, impaired performance, and memory problems. Even after obtaining a full night's sleep, infected individuals often report frequent nightmares, though no central themes or correlations have been observed in the content of said dreams. Within a month, infected individuals will often develop visual and auditory hallucinations, as well as delusions that their mind is no longer their own, but rather has been stolen by someone or something. Soon after, infected individuals descend into full psychosis as they become unable to distinguish the contents of their dreams from reality. In extreme cases, after at least 2 months of infection, hair loss, keratitis subita, partial or complete blindness, somatic complaints, cataplexy, and alien limb syndrome have been observed. Attempts by medical staff to alleviate these conditions in the long term have thus far been met with failure, though symptoms are delayed in individuals with previous diagnosis of insomnia. Sleep deprivation has likewise proven effective in delaying the onset of the symptoms of SCP-3060 infection. Research into a cure is currently ongoing. If no human subjects enter the area of an SCP-3060 infected individual's effect during REM sleep for 7 consecutive days, or the infected individual dies, an instance of SCP-3060-A will appear. The SCP-3060-A entity will then proceed to search for the nearest sleeping human. Upon locating of this individual, SCP-3060-A will stand over them until they enter their next REM sleep cycle, at which point the SCP-3060-A entity will reach into their skull and vanish. At this point, the sleeping individual will become infected. Should the sleeping individual awaken during the process, or SCP-3060-A be unable to locate a suitable subject within 3 hours, it will vanish without spreading the SCP-3060 infection. Addendum 3060-A Recovery. Foundation agents first became aware of SCP-3060 on March 21, 2015, when the entire census of the Portland Sleep Medicine Clinic became infected following a volunteer sleep study using SCP-3060 to prevent hypnagogic sleep paralysis. All infected individuals thereafter were brought into Foundation custody, and all records related to the study seized by Foundation operatives. None of the records seized indicated an origin of the SCP-3060 instances, and all staff associated with the project died in their sleep shortly upon being brought into Foundation custody. Autopsies revealed large quantities of SCP-3966-A within the staff member's cerebrospinal fluid. An investigation into Dr. Cynthia Zhao, the primary investigator of the Portland Sleep Medicine study associated with SCP-3060, uncovered her to be a frequent user of SCP-2876. Upon MTF Omicron Rho, the Dream Team, investigation into potential Oneiroi involvement in the creation of SCP-3060, contacts within the Oneiroi collective have denied responsibility for SCP-3060, and have indicated that the SCP-2876 app had encountered no less than 4 internal breaches of security, particularly in areas of user information since its launch. MTF Omicron Rho's investigation is still ongoing. Addendum 3060-B Video Log Transcript of Task 3060-3. Forward. The following events took place on April 2nd, 2015, as part of the initial containment experiments for SCP-3060. An SCP-3060 infected individual was placed in a standard humanoid containment cell with instructions to go to sleep after being fitted with sensors to monitor brainwave patterns and vital signals. D-1260, D-2860, D-2106, and D-2306 were placed in nearby cells within the same holding block as the infected individual. All cells were equipped with CCTV cameras feeding to the same monitor bank. At approximately 2340, the infected individual entered her second REM cycle. 23:45:21. D-1260 is playing solitaire at the table in his cell. D-2860 is reading on her cot. D-2106 is pacing within her cell. D-2306 has fallen asleep sitting in his cell's chair. 23:45:58. SCP-3060-A-1 appears standing over the infected individual and resembles a headless humanoid with arms and legs replaced by spinal columns. Shortly after, an additional 4 instances of SCP-3060-A appear. Each additional instance resembles a featureless humanoid silhouette. The instances remain standing over the infected for the next 5 minutes. All D-Class personnel appear to have become catatonic. Those D-Class awake have expressions of distress upon their face. 23:51:00. SCP-3060-A-2 turns and leaves the infected cell, phasing through the door and entering the hallway, where it then passes into D-2306's cell. SCP-3060-A-2 stands over D-2306 for several seconds, then bends over and places its face near D-2306's ear before reaching into his skull. 23:53:30. SCP-3060-A-3 phases through the floor and vanishes for several moments before phasing up through the floor of D-2860's cell, through her cot, then through her. SCP-3060-A-3 remains motionless for several moments as it looks down on D-2860, who appears to be struggling against her catatonic state. SCP-3060-A-3 then slowly reaches out and closes D-2860's eyes with its hand, then reaches into her skull. 23:55:45. SCP-3060-A-2 removes its hand from D-2306's skull and takes the shape of a male human, with mathematical symbols in place of facial features. SCP-3060-A-2 vanishes. 23:56:15. SCP-3060-A-4 climbs up the cell wall and phases through the ceiling, and vanishes for several moments before phasing into D-2106's cell through the ventilation grate. The instance drops down and walks around D-2106 as she struggles against her catatonic state. D-2106 falls over. SCP-3060-A-4 wraps its arms around D-2106 and begins to caress her head. After several moments of this, SCP-3060-A-4 reaches into D-2106's skull. 23:57:46. SCP-3060-A-3 removes its hand from D-2860's skull and takes the shape of a humanoid composed of tightly wound thread. A variety of spiders are visible crawling in and out of openings along SCP-3060-A-3's body. SCP-3060-A-3 vanishes. 23:58:42. SCP-3060-A-5 leaves the infected cell, phasing through the walls from cell to cell before finally arriving at D-1260's cell. SCP-3060-A-5 stands across the table from D-1260, staring at him for several moments while caressing his hand. D-1260 struggles against his catatonic state. SCP-3060-A-5 reaches into D-1260's skull. 000047. SCP-3060-A-4 removes its hand from D-2106's skull and takes the shape of a featureless white humanoid dressed in a Foundation lab coat. SCP-3060-A-4 vanishes. 000230. SCP-3060-A-5 removes its hand from D-1260's skull and takes the shape of a featureless black humanoid, dressed in an amalgamation of paraphernalia from various authoritarian regimes. SCP-3060-A-5 vanishes. 000538. SCP-3060-A-1 remains standing over the infected until she awakens at approximately 0550:00. Addendum 3060-C Interview Log 3060-6. The following interview was conducted as part of a routine mental health monitoring for SCP-3060 infected individuals on 03/03/2016. Interviewed researcher Joanna Corbin. Interviewer researcher Roland Farrow. Forward. The interview took place approximately 1.5 months following researcher Corbin's infection by SCP-3060 during the 15/1/2016 containment breach of an instance of SCP-3060-A. Researcher Corbin had begun to report visual and auditory hallucinations 1 week earlier. Due to her knowledge on SCP-3060's effects and prior diagnosis of insomnia, researcher Corbin had shown remarkable resistance to SCP-3060's hallucinogenic effects. Begin log. Farrow. Evening, Joanna. Corbin. Evening, Roland. Sorry if I'm not exactly 100% today. To be frank, I'm exhausted, and it's hard to concentrate when the walls are bleeding. Don't sit there! Researcher Farrow pauses as he begins to sit in his chair. He then stands and straightens his lab coat. May I ask why? Trust me, Roland, I'll be much more composed if I don't have to watch you sit in that chair. The hallucinations have progressed to that severity already? They have. It's like my eyes are constantly getting these little pop-ups of nonsense. And then there is this fucking voice that keeps commenting on things. Yeah, I'm talking about you. Shut up! The auditory hallucinations are constant at this point, then? Just the one. I personally like to think it's the voice of SCP-3060-A that's creeping on me. But I have no way to prove that, and it's not like it's going to tell the truth. Researcher Corbin rubs her eyes for several moments and sighs heavily. I'm so fucking fried right now, Roland. Sleeping is becoming a chore, a nightmare-filled chore that leaves me feeling more exhausted than when I went to bed. And when I wake up, it's like I'm taking the nightmares with me. Like the barrier between my consciousness and subconsciousness has become a sieve or something. These auditory hallucinations, what do they... Researcher Corbin covers her mouth with her hand and stifles a mixture of tears and laughter. She then points at Researcher Farrow. Your face has just melted off, Roland. You should probably hurry this up. I don't know how much more I can take. Right. These auditory hallucinations, what kind of things do they say? comment on thoughts I have, on things I see, sometimes asks me about myself. I have to say, when the other infected said they feel like their mind isn't their own, I didn't really know what they were saying, but I sure as hell do now.
Do you believe that the voice is trying to control you, command you, influence you in any way?
Fuck if I know, Roland. If it is, it's doing a pretty shitty job at it. Honestly, I'd say it's just here for the headspace and to enjoy the ride, but again, what the hell do I know?
Researcher Corbin then closes her eyes and places her head in her arms upon the table.
Can we be done, please?
I'm afraid we have just a few more things to get through before we're done. Bear with me.
All right.
Researcher Farrow quickly writes down several sentences on a piece of notebook paper. How you are describing these auditory hallucinations, you make it sound like a separate intelligence. I'm writing down a few questions that I'm going to want you to ask it. Researcher Farrow slides the piece of paper to Researcher Corbin. Corbin eyes the document for several moments, then turns her head towards the edge of the table. Corbin then sighs in frustration before rubbing her temples.
The words march like ants off the page, Roland. I can't read this.
I'll dictate them then. I got a hunch, but I'm going to need some confirmation before I can move forward in that direction. Researcher Farrow takes the piece of paper back and begins to read aloud. 1. What do you call yourself? 2. Are you a separate entity from Joanna Corbin? 3. Do you exist within her mindscape, or are you based in some other...
Researcher Corbin rapidly backs away from Researcher Farrow in fear, flipping over the table on the way. Jesus, fire! Roland, fire! Researcher Corbin removes her jacket and tackles Farrow to the ground and attempts to snuff out a fire on Farrow's person. Security personnel intervene and pull Corbin off Farrow, keeping her restrained as she struggles to free herself for a total of 2 minutes. Eventually, Corbin yields. Farrow then orders the security personnel to release her. Corbin proceeds to lower herself onto the floor and crawl away. She then sits in the far corner of the room in tears.
Christ, Joanna, what the hell was that?
Corbin. You got to the second question. That burst into flames. Roland, I can't watch you die like that. I can't answer these questions. I can't fucking do this.
Researcher Farrow approaches Researcher Corbin in an attempt to comfort her. Corbin immediately pulls herself into the fetal position.
Get away from me!
Researcher Farrow pauses for several moments, then nods in agreement. Very well, I'll leave the list with you. See if you can ask them when you have a less visually clustered moment. Researcher Farrow leaves. Researcher Corbin attempts to read the list again. After what appear to be multiple attempts, she screams out in frustration, crumples up the paper, and throws it against the nearby wall. Researcher Corbin then places her head in her hands. End log. Addendum 3060-D, Update 22-10-2016. On October 22, 2016, a Curvier pharmaceutical advertisement for SCP-3060 appeared in over 100 publications in the United States, Canada, and Europe. By the time mass censorship protocols could be enacted and the source of the ad was traced to a Curvier logistics warehouse in Seattle, Washington, approximately 3,000 instances of SCP-3060 had been shipped, with MTF Alpha-4 Pony Express operatives able to stop 2,700 in transit. An additional 270 instances of SCP-3060 were later captured at their destinations. Currently, 30 instances of SCP-3060 remain uncontained. Warehouse staff were oblivious to the effects of the devices when interviewed.
having all been hired within the last 2 weeks. Over half of these individuals were users of SCP-2876 prior to their hire date. All warehouse staff brought into Foundation custody died in their sleep shortly afterward. As before, large quantities of SCP-3966-A were found within the warehouse's staff's CSF during autopsy. An investigation into both Curvier Pharmaceutical and Curvier Logistics is ongoing. As of 25/10/2016, an unknown number of SCP-3060 infected individuals are currently believed to be uncontained, with outbreaks occasionally occurring in several major metropolitan areas. Attempts to contain SCP-3060 infected individuals are ongoing. Due to SCP-3060 infection remaining largely undetectable within the general public until end-stage symptoms manifest, several mobile containment forces are on standby to investigate reports of multiple psychotic breaks and acts of violence occurring within a short time frame within the same geographic area. SCP-3060's object class has subsequently been updated to Keter. Pandemic levels of SCP-3060 infection are currently being considered a potential AK-class end-of-the-world scenario. Well, if you're seeing sleep paralysis demons, I think you're about to go insane and die. That, or it's regular sleep paralysis and you're not infected with a killer virus anomaly. Either way, thank you very much for coming, dear researchers. It's been an honor reading for you. Apologies for the lateness this week. There's been a number of presentations and other stuff that's been popping up. But I should get to it slowly. Good luck out there, and I hope to see you all next time.